When it comes to JRPGs, I've honestly never played a single one. Probably because a lot of them look like an Excel spreadsheet. I mean, seriously dude, does this look fun to you? Persona, while I've never personally played it, always stood out to me. Maybe it's because of the insanely over-the-top UA that Persona 5 has, or the fact that the characters, in typical anime fashion, yell the word Persona every time they attack. But this series is all about getting out of my comfort zone and trying out games I'd never usually think about playing, so here we are. For sure I was hesitant going into this, since games like Persona 4 don't really seem like they'd be up my alley, but when I tell you this game ruined my life, I'm not joking. In a good way, of course, in the way that you never see your friends or family ever again, but you enjoy every minute of it. Welcome to the pilot episode of The GOATs, where we've compiled a list of the top 100 video games of all time to play them in order and see what holds up and what's actually trash. And today we're taking a look at Persona 4, specifically the Steam version of Persona 4 Golden. There will be spoilers in this video, so here's my quick spoiler-free review. Yes.
You're really into me, aren't you? A motorcycle date, huh? Well, if you want to take a ride that bad, I'll go with you. Wait!
Quick disclaimer, this video will barely scratch the surface of the game. There are so many things to talk about and analyze, but I don't want this video to turn from a review into a 10-hour-long analysis video. I'll mostly be focusing on the main story beats and core gameplay mechanics, but I'll leave videos in the description if you're interested in a more academic analysis of the game. And with that out of the way, let's get into it. The game begins by showing the protagonist of our story, whose name canonically is Yu Narakami, but for this playthrough I decided to name him Farty Shithead, which will generate some hilarious dialogue later, moving from the big city to the small seaside town of Inaba, Japan. Through the first 30 minutes of the game, we're slowly introduced to our new quiet life in Inaba. We meet our guardian, our uncle Ryotaro Dojima, and his daughter Nanako. We also enroll in the local Yasogami High School and meet our classmates, cycling student, short-haired girl, and black-haired girl. Oh yeah, and I guess there's that weird dream sequence about seeking the truth that introduces us to combat, but we'll get into that later. Unlike in real life, it's seemingly very easy for Farty Shithead to make new friends, as short-haired girl Chie Satonaka and her friend black-haired student Yukiko Amagi offer to walk home from school with us. Not long before Chie gives bleak-looking student a swift kick straight to the balls for ruining her prized DVD.
Mine's cracked too. Critical hit to the nads.
On the way back home, however, we're greeted with a gruesome sight. Swarms of police are investigating the murder of a local TV announcer found dead hanging upside down from an antenna. Our uncle Dojima, who's the detective assigned to this case, politely tells us to piss off and head straight home. Considering the heavy fog and the meticulous way that the TV announcer was murdered, we begin to get the sense that something is going on here. After this scene, we're finally let loose and can explore the town. There's not much that we can do at this point except talk to stupidly honest policeman. We realize that the town truly is small. When I think of RPGs, I usually think of some grand expansive map dotted with tons of small towns and NPCs on each corner, waiting to give you the next quest. But Persona 4 takes it in a different direction. The map is smaller and more intimate, really driving that small town vibe. And I think the game pulls it off very well. Persona 4 is actually quite memorable in this regard. There's a strange feeling of, cozy melancholy, I guess, surrounding Inaba. I mean, yeah, there's a psychopath running around killing everyone, but day-to-day life is still eerily peaceful. One day, you're out busting your ass trying to save people from getting murdered, but the next day, you're back to studying for your finals and hanging out with your friends. This juxtaposition really gives Inaba a very unique, quite memorable feel. Not to mention the nostalgia you feel for a childhood that you never even lived through. Summertime in a boring town out in the sticks where the only thing to really do is hang out at the local superstore with your group of friends. All the little moments like eating dinner with your family or taking a trip to the floodplain to walk around with your friends really add up to drive home the small town feel of Inaba. I'd almost wish I lived there myself, if it weren't for all the murders going on. Anyways, the next day we learn that cycling student, aka bleak-looking student, aka rolling student, is named Yosuke Hanamura, another classmate who happened to transfer here from a larger city. After school, Yosuke treats us to grilled steak from a local Juness department store. Chie tells us about a rumored midnight channel. When viewed at midnight on a rainy day, the midnight channel will apparently tell you who your true soulmate is. Seems dubious if you ask me, but Farty decides to try it out anyway. Upon tuning into the midnight channel, Farty discovers that he can actually stick his hand into the TV. After nearly getting sucked in, he falls back and whacks his head, And it's about at this point in the game when I started to ask myself, what the fuck is going on here? The next day, Farty tells his friends about the experience he had with the TV and Midnight Channel. Obviously dubious of his claims, they head to the electronics department at the Juness store after school and quickly dispel his experience as being just a dream. But as soon as they look away, however, Farty halfway inserts himself into the TV. Instead of doing something a sane person might do, like, I don't know, maybe calling the cops or the local priest, Farty's friends bump into him and they all vanish into the TV. Inside of the TV, they're greeted with the Best Spy version of Silent Hill. A dense, oppressive yellow fog shrouds the surrounding landscape. They appear to be standing upon what looks like a stage for some sort of television show. Looking for a way out, they eventually stumble across a strange-looking portal. Upon entering, they find a bedroom filled with ripped posters and a noose hanging in the center of the room. What could this symbolize? Yosuke also really needs to pee.
Yosuke, what are you doing?
I gotta let it out before I piss my pants!
You're going here? Oh, you have got to be kidding.
Running out of ideas, the team returns to their starting point and are greeted by a mysterious talking bear. The bear complains that somebody from the outside has been throwing people inside of the TV, then also swiftly tells the team to piss off, conjuring a stack of TVs to form an exit from the TV world. The team realizes that the posters they found in the TV world were actually of Masuzu Haraga, the wife of the man who had an affair with the recently deceased TV announcer. At this point, it's quite easy for the player to connect the dots. Whoever ends up dead in the real world has their own space carved out in the TV world. Upon returning home, Farty finds out that Saki Konishi, the high schooler that initially found the body of the TV announcer, has gone missing right after she was interviewed on TV. I wonder if this is a pattern. Sure enough, the next day, we find out that Saki Konishi was murdered hanging off a power line. Yosuke, clearly distraught by the death of his crush, reveals that he believes it was Saki that he saw on the Midnight Channel last night. He also believes that the murders are connected to the TV world. After school, the gang decides to head into the TV again in order to look for clues regarding Saki's murder. After promising the bear that they'd find out whoever was behind this, they begin exploring the TV world and discover a replica of the Inaba liquor store with the same strange portal that they found the other day. We're then treated to a sick-ass cutscene of Farty Shithead finally releasing the true power of his persona. After a quick introduction to combat, Yosuke and Farty head inside the Shadow Kanishi liquor store. Inside, we're greeted with a shadow version of Yosuke. Shadow Yosuke is a projection of Yosuke's darkest inner thoughts. The real Yosuke vehemently denies that that's how he truly feels. Eventually, after saying those fateful words, "You're not me," Shadow Yosuke transforms into the first boss. Upon defeating the boss, Yosuke confronts his shadow self and admits that his dark side is also a part of him. When he does this, the shadow dissipates, and Yosuke also gains the power of his own persona. And this is the basic loop that the story is based on. The serial killer throws someone into the TV, you travel into the TV world and help the victim face their other self and accept their dark side as part of them. And that's the unique thing about Persona 4. Sure, you go around and you have typical turn-based combat with the shadow creatures, but at its core, Persona 4 is a game about identity. Both the one you outwardly portray and the dark one that you suppress. It's a game about self-acceptance and community. The game's theme revolves around the idea that you can't grow alone. The primary way to grow your strength in battle is to form bonds with other people. This, in turn, also helps them grow their own strength in battle. Honestly, it's kind of like the with the power of friendship trope, but executed well enough to not be cheesy. I honestly thought that this was quite a powerful message. Of course, it makes for a unique game mechanic, having to hang out with your friends and form bonds to level up yourself in combat. But it's also a very relatable message for a lot of people. Everyone has some sort of trauma or baggage or insecurity, but the game lets you know that you aren't alone. By trusting others and letting them in, you too can gain your own strength in your own battles. Going back to the story, for the most part, it's actually quite engaging. Of course, we meet a lot of interesting characters along the way. The real strength of Persona 4, in my opinion, is the characters. I won't get too in-depth analyzing the characters since I don't want this video to be 6 hours long, but I'll leave some videos in the description that do take a deeper look into each character, if you're interested. Each character, especially the ones in the core investigation team, are very relatable and memorable, and each of them have their own distinct personalities. Yosuke is your typical teenage boy, always spouting dirty jokes, but always means well. Chie is your typical one-of-the-guys tomboy girls with the heart made of gold and a sworn duty to protect others. Yukiko is a shy, reserved bookworm trapped by the high expectations made of her. Also, she was my romance choice, feel free to debate that in the comments. Kanji is outwardly a juvenile delinquent who is terrified of showing his softer side. Rise is a model-turned everyday high school student who believes that everyone loves her for the image that she portrays rather than for who she really is. Naoto is a brilliant young detective who feels that she has to present as male to be taken seriously by the police department. And last, but certainly not least, Teddy is literally a hollow shell who's trying to figure out his own identity and his place in the world. Each of these characters undergo a good amount of growth during the story. Whenever you find these characters inside the TV world, you see them basically arguing with themselves, trying to suppress their true inner thoughts and feelings. It's only when they finally accept these feelings as a part of themselves, and after an agonizingly tedious boss battle, that they can finally escape the TV world and unleash the power of their persona. Outside of combat, a majority of your time is spent hanging out with these characters in order to strengthen your bonds with them. In doing so, not only are they upgraded in battle, but the player is as well, allowing them to craft even more powerful personas. Each so-called social link is basically a side story for that character about how they emotionally develop, and how they all come to rely on Farty Shithead. Honestly, now that I think about it, Farty has to be doing overtime with emotional labor if he's got literally half the town relying on him for support. Honestly, I'd hate being that guy. These side stories, for the most part, are pretty good and do a great job of showing the growth of the characters. I particularly liked Yosuke's social link scenes that show him come to terms with the death of Saki Konishi and with living away from the city. Some of them, however, were not as good. I honestly wasn't a huge fan of Ai Abahara, since she honestly just seemed like a stuck-up bitch. I even managed to reverse my social link with her because I told her she was being over-the-top mean rejecting someone. I mean, let's be honest, she really was. Of course, now I know that there's way more to her than that, like way more. But honestly, can you blame me? Man only has so much patience. I also couldn't get over Ayane from the Symphonic Band. Maybe it's because of the weird way that she talks to you. Honestly, just freaked me out a little bit.
Oh, Senpai.
As for the story as a whole, trying to track down the killer that keeps throwing people into TVs, it's honestly pretty well written. The twist about who the killer is genuinely got me good. I won't spoil it right here, but we'll definitely talk about it towards the end of the video. I will say that a lot of the dialogue surrounding the investigation is about stuff that the player is very likely to have already picked up on. A perfect example of this is when the investigation team is talking about how Kanji didn't fit the profile that they previously had for all the victims since he was male instead of female. However, up to that point in the story, basically everybody who got interviewed on TV ended up disappearing. Might as well put up a giant neon sign pointing to the TV saying, "This guy is dead!" Speaking of dialogue, I have to bring up some of the, questionable dialogue that the game has.
What's so great about an idol anyway, right, class? She's just a piece of inexperienced jailbait.
They're getting out of the water! Teddy, what gives? I'm done for. I'll go look for something. Sit tight!
Hey there, little lady. Wanna launch some fireworks of love with me?
How do you do that?
Well,
Cut it out, Teddy! Do you want Dojima-san to haul you in?
Not to mention all the filler that exists in the story. This is my main complaint about the writing, especially in between dungeons, when you sometimes have to wait 2 weeks for the person you just rescued to recover their strength. Basically nothing happens. There are also a lot of scenes that do not advance the plot whatsoever, like the camping trip or the cross-dressing beauty pageant. Yes, that's a thing that actually happens in this game. A game about trying to catch a murderer has a cross-dressing beauty pageant.
give me your heart.
That's a boy? He's so cute!
I'd hit it.
I can partially forgive Atlas for this since these filler scenes are still pretty enjoyable, for the most part. Except the beauty pageant. Man, that scene was awkward. There's also all the red herrings that the game throws at you. My personal favorite was when the investigation team and Adachi arrested a pervert photographer trying to snap a picture of Rise. To anybody with half a brain, this guy clearly isn't a killer. I mean, just look at him. Or Mitsuo, the guy who looks incredibly creepy, maybe even looks like a killer, but it seems a little too perfect that he would be the one behind all this. In my opinion, I think the game went slightly overboard with the red herrings. Still though, all that aside, it's still a pretty solidly written story. It gets a lot better and much more emotionally charged towards the end of the game. There's one scene in particular that's enough to make a grown man cry. If you know, you know. We'll talk about it more in depth in the spoiler-tastic ending discussion. Real quick, I also have to mention the Persona 4 animation. If you've played Persona 4, it's definitely worth a watch. It basically just follows the story beat for beat, but it also adds a lot of extra dialogue and inside jokes, and it actually gives Yu Narukami a voice. And I gotta say, Narukami has to be the coolest motherfucker to ever exist.
They're ready to go, and so is my heart.
are. Well, time to go. Hey, did you just see that?
I kinda wish that I taped it.
I highly recommend watching it if you enjoyed this game. For some reason, you can't stream it through normal means if you're in the US, but if there's a will, there's a way. Like I mentioned before, a majority of your time spent outside of dungeons is spent hanging out with your friends to increase their social link score. Each of these friends is associated with a different arcana, like Yosuke with the Magician Arcana for example. As you level up your social link ranks with these characters, personas that you craft with that respective arcana gain a boost in power upon creation. We'll talk more in depth about what personas actually are in just a little bit. There's a lot of other things to do besides hanging out with your friends. There are 5 different social scores that the player can improve: knowledge, diligence, expression, understanding, and courage. Certain aspects of the game are locked behind having a certain level in these skills. There are a number of different ways to increase these skills. A lot of them involve taking on a part-time job, like translating Japanese into English to increase expression, or working at a daycare to improve your understanding. You do earn money from these jobs, but more importantly, it increases your social scores. Without these skills, you could be locked out of a decent portion of the game. And also without enough courage, you can't call Yukiko a cutie pie. Aww. There are also weather-dependent events to keep track of. Of course, the Midnight Channel only airs on rainy nights, so your evening is always spent watching the Midnight Channel rather than studying or hanging out with Nanako. Certain fish can also only be caught during the rain. Yes, apparently you can go fishing too. The Chinese Diner's Bottomless Meat Bowl will also give you a lot of free stat bonuses during rainy days only. But my personal favorite is deciding that a rainy day in the middle of November is a perfect day to go swimming at the beach, which will give you an increased amount of courage. Here's the catch though. Whatever you decide to do, time will advance forward. If you dawdle too long, the person that you're trying to save from the TV world will die, and you'll get a game over. You have to juggle between leveling up your social links, increasing your social skills, and traveling inside the TV world. Seems pretty straightforward at first, but by the end of the game, there's about 600 people to hang out with and 47 part-time jobs you could have, on top of being in the school band and the soccer team, and having to study for final exams. There's also the hot springs in Okina City, where you can swap your party's abilities out, the cafe in Okina City, where you can extract skill cards, going to the movies with your friends to level up their personas. You get the idea. There's a lot of shit to do. And the game does not fuck around. After its very slow burn prologue, they basically dump you right into the time management simulator. Honestly, I thought it was pretty fun. Clearly, I didn't do that good of a job, considering I completely missed Naoto's social link, and I only started Kanji's link right before the end of the game, but it kinda gave me the Stardew Valley effect of meticulously planning every single day in advance. There are also a ton of miscellaneous quests for the random NPCs around town. Most of these just involve going back into a dungeon you've already completed to grab a specific item. Mostly I just ignored these, but the one time that I did go out of my way to complete one, I only earned 15,000 yen from it. Total waste of time, if you ask me. So, you managed to slide into Yukiko's DMs. What's next? As I mentioned before, building social links allows you to infuse power into your so-called persona. Personas are basically avatars that fight for you inside the TV world. Each of them come with their own special set of abilities and elements that they're strong or weak against. All the personas are based on different folk tales or religious figures. Your starting persona, Izanagi, is based on the Izanagi in ancient Japanese folklore that gave birth to the Japanese islands with the help of Izanami. I wonder what the significance of that is. There are also some other figures that a Western audience will likely know, like Anubis, Jack Frost, or Alice from Alice in Wonderland. Their designs are pretty cool, and they each have different animations whenever they perform attacks or cast spells. My personal favorite was Lamia, who looks completely unbothered whenever she attacks. There are 2 ways to obtain new personas. The first way is as a reward after combat. The other and much better way of obtaining personas is by the process of fusing 2 or more personas together. Inside the Velvet Room, and by the way, I know you didn't ask, but Margaret is totally my hear me out for this game. You can fuse your personas together to create other personas. In typical JRPG fashion, this was explained in a 100-page long legal document, but it basically boils down to just throwing some shit in a blender and seeing what pops out. Technically, you don't have to utilize the Persona Fusion feature to beat the game, plenty of Mad Lads have proven that. However, you'll be missing out on a lot of power in combat. Basically, the only way to truly level up your personas is to infuse them into more powerful ones. Not only do you get bonus XP if you have levels in the social link of that persona's arcana, you can also pass down abilities to the new persona from the ones you used in the infusion, allowing you to create a Jack Frost that shoots fire breath, for instance. Then you can use that persona in the next infusion to pass down its skills, and so on and so on. Obviously, there's plenty of ways to min-max this system, especially if you have the wiki at your disposal. However, I did not utilize the wiki since, I'm trying to go in blind here. I basically just ended up throwing random crap together until I had a high level guy, and that seemed to work pretty well for me. Another feature of Persona Fusion is the Fusion Forecast. On certain days, you'll get bonuses by using a specific persona in a fusion, crafting a persona of a specific arcana, etc. To be honest, I thought the system was just kinda dumb and usually not worth thinking too much about, but it was nice occasionally having free social link XP from infusions though. You may also come across skill cards as combat rewards. With these skill cards, you can either use them immediately and give your persona that skill, or you can hand them in to Marie in the Velvet Room to be able to purchase that skill card whenever you'd like. I usually just handed in all the skill cards that I found, but I never really utilized them since I was basically nuking everything and didn't really feel the need to use them. The combat in Persona 4, as with most JRPGs, is turn-based. Whenever it's your turn, you click on which attack you want to use, and watch as the enemy reflects that damage right back at you. The player has access to many kinds of attacks and other abilities. You got your fire, ice, wind, electrical, and physical attacks, of course. You've also got almighty damage, which has the unique property of not being resisted or reflected by any enemy. There's also a lot of different abilities that will buff your party, debuff the enemy stats, inflict status effects, etc. You've got Tsukakaja, Terukaja, Rakunda, Ballsack. Ballsack. Certain enemies will have certain weaknesses and strengths against elemental attacks. If you manage to hit an enemy with an attack that they're weak to, they'll get downed and you get a so-called one more attack, where you can make another attack in a turn. If you're up against multiple enemies and you keep managing to hit their weaknesses, you can theoretically keep attacking over and over. Once all the enemies are down, you can perform an all-out attack, where you and your party basically dogpile onto the enemy and do massive free damage. To be honest, this never got old. The animation of the character's portraits is flashy and very satisfying.
Enemy down.
You can also switch your persona at any time in middle of combat, which is very useful considering different personas come with different abilities and different elemental strengths and weaknesses. Facing an enemy that loves using wind attacks? Switch to the persona that negates wind attacks. Your party needs some healing? Switch to the persona with Diaran and Medea Rama. The shuffle time mechanic makes choosing a reward after combat an interesting minigame in and of itself. Occasionally, or all the time if you land a killing blow with an all-out attack, you'll be rewarded with a shuffle time after an encounter. These rewards can range anywhere from restoring some of your SP and HP to upgrading the level of your persona. However, there are also cards that allow you to take more cards at the cost of a downside, such as half experience, half money, or losing one of the cards you've already drawn. If you manage to grab all the cards from the shuffle time, you're rewarded with a sweep bonus, which guarantees a shuffle time after the next combat, along with being able to pick 3 cards instead of just 1. The sweep bonus can definitely snowball into basically always getting a sweep bonus in future shuffle times, especially in earlier dungeons where the shuffle times only ever have a few cards. For the most part, the combat is pretty good. It's like a fun puzzle trying to figure out what the enemies are weak to, which persona you should equip, and having to manage your resources like items and SP. Not to mention how satisfying it is to knock all the enemies on their asses and get that all-out attack. The dungeons, for the most part, are pretty well designed, albeit a bit labyrinthy for my taste. I really like how the dungeons for each character are perfectly designed to reflect their shadow selves. The most obvious example is Kanji's dungeon, considering that his entire thing is about his gentler, softer side being misconstrued as being fruity. It makes sense that his dungeon is reminiscent of a male-only sauna filled with half-naked dudes. Many argue that this dungeon shows that Kanji also deals with issues of his own sexuality, but if you ask me, I think that's kind of missing the point. It's more about him not wanting people to judge him just because he has, quote, girly hobbies like sewing and knitting. He just wants to be accepted by anybody, whether it be a girl or a boy. But I'm getting off track here. I said this wouldn't be a deep analysis. A similar argument could be made with Naoto on the operating table in her dungeon, but okay, for real. Let's get back on track, not an analysis video. The bosses also have similarly excellent designs. Much like the dungeons themselves, the bosses' designs also showcase the inner thoughts of the characters. Like Yukiko, trapped in a birdcage, showing her feelings about being trapped in a life pre-planned for her in Inaba. Chie donning a sort of dominatrix suit, symbolizing the control that she believes she has over Yukiko, keeping Yukiko around because she wants someone that needs to rely on her. And Kanji? Just look at it. On the subject of bosses, however, I gotta say, the biggest complaint I have about combat is the boss encounters. Especially late game, there aren't any weaknesses you can exploit against them. Now, I'm not claiming to be an expert Persona player or anything. This is my first JRPG after all. But it seems like even if I perfectly set up buffs and debuffs, manage resources excellently, and never down a party member, the bosses take so fucking long to kill. Easily, they could take at least 30 minutes. And not to mention how bad it feels whenever you get close to beating them, only to have the boss instantly wipe your party. And the worst offender of this was the Namatame boss fight. There was a few times I came really close, only to lose right at the end. Of course, I could have gone back and grinded dungeons to gain more XP to deal more damage, but this leads me to my next point. The combat, especially towards the end of the game, became a repetitive chore. Wasn't too bad at the front half of the game when I was still learning the ropes and the combat encounters were genuinely challenging, but in the latter half of the game, it felt like I was nuking entire armies with a single cast of Mahamaon? I don't know how you pronounce that. Anyways, apparently it has a whopping 40% chance to instantly kill any enemies that aren't resistant to light damage. If the enemy is weak to light damage, as it seemed like a lot were in the Heaven dungeon, that chance to kill increases to 100%. Even if light or dark damage isn't an option, Rize Kujikawa, once you get some levels in her social link, will literally scan the enemies for you and straight up tell you what their weaknesses are. This, combined with having Naoto in your party, whose persona has no elemental weakness and has damaging abilities from almost every element, turns the combat from an interesting puzzle into having ChatGPT do your homework for you. And one more small complaint. The party AI is absolutely stupid. I'm not sure how the game decides what the AI should do, but more often than not, it's not exactly what you want it to do. They will often leave themselves in one-shot range instead of healing up, and they'll usually just throw out attacks willy-nilly and waste SP regardless of what the enemy's weakness is. Thankfully, this point is null and void due to the fact that you can directly control what your party members do. I've heard that the older Persona games don't let you control your party members in combat, and I'd imagine that's gotta be hella annoying. I honestly thought I was just goated at the game, but it turns out the Persona community generally agrees that Persona 4 is on the easier side. Honestly, I should have played on the hard difficulty now that I think about it. If you properly utilize all the tools that the game gives you, honestly, it's a breeze. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, I just would have preferred more of a challenge. Before we wrap this up, I have to talk about the ending of the game. So, if you ignored my spoiler warning up to this point, now is your final chance to turn this video off and buy the goddamn game. I won't go over the entire storyline here since this video script is already kind of ballooning out of control, so I'll just jump ahead to the final stretch of the game after it literally tells you, hey dipshit, save your game, important plot choices coming up. The ending of Persona 4 is quite often discussed, and for good reason. There are a few different endings depending on your dialogue choices in the hospital. For the ending that I got, I decided to not throw Namatame into the TV. I knew something didn't quite add up since the game is almost rage baiting you into immediately throwing him into the TV to kill him, which I found quite suspicious. Apparently though, I picked the wrong dialogue option here. This lets Namatame live, but Nanako gets revived. Thank God, by the way. That scene where she dies is enough to make a grown man cry.
I'm scared. Big Bro. Dad and Annie.
Afterwards, the game skips forward to next March with the fog still present, and you're sent off on the train by your friends, with Nanako still in critical condition. I knew I had to have fucked up somewhere. Fog was still there, and I had that nagging feeling that I must have missed something. So in preparation for this video, I do some research and look at the different endings of Persona 4, and that's when I found out Adachi was the killer?
Great vegetables.
This made me think about everything Adachi ever said or did, and say to myself, oh yeah, that is really weird, isn't it? Like how the accused murderer is on the same floor as Dojima because Adachi knew he would try something, or the fact that he doesn't outright dismiss the investigation team talking about jumping into TVs, or the weird information dumps, or the fact that he was always nearby when something weird happened. The game spent its entire runtime training you to think critically, to think like a detective, to not always jump to the easiest conclusion as presented in front of you, and I certainly failed on that aspect, but I'm not mad. You got me, Atlas. Of course, it would be remiss of me to not at least mention the other endings. There's the Accomplice ending, where if you have a high enough social link score with Adachi, you can burn the letter that he wrote to you and cover his tracks for him. Honestly, who the fuck would do that? Then there's the true ending, where before going back home, you meet up with your buddies one last time and defeat Izanami. See, told you it had significance. Who's apparently the god who controls the TV world. Who, by the way, manifests herself in the real world as that gas station attendant we met at the very beginning of the game. As soon as Farty shakes her hand, he gets sick with a headache and gains his power. And this is also how Namatame and Adachi gain this power. Apparently, Izanami did this because she wanted to see what humanity truly wanted. Seeing how Adachi's actions affected people the most, she assumed that everyone just wanted to die, I guess, and filled Inaba with the fog from the TV world. The final fight with her is actually quite cinematic, with Farty utilizing the full power of all the social bonds he's formed thus far to defeat Izanami and lift the fog from Inaba. And then, of course, there's the golden ending, which requires a true ending plus a level 10 social link with Marie. Marie goes missing, and while on the skiing trip, you're pulled into the TV world by Margaret to find Marie in the Hollow Forest. Apparently, she was also secretly a god sent to spy on humanity. Marie, not wanting to participate in this, hides in the Hollow Forest to self-destruct. Of course, Farty and company come to save the day and defeat her persona, Kasumi no Okami. Perhaps one day I'll make a follow-up to this video since there's a lot we didn't cover and there's still a lot of gameplay that I missed. I had to stop somewhere though, otherwise it would take a million years to make this video. Here's my final opinion on Persona 4. While not perfect, it's a very well designed game with a cast of memorable characters, an interesting plot, and decent combat. Even if you typically don't enjoy games of this genre, I'd still highly recommend it. It's a very memorable experience and a fun ride from beginning to end. As for its ranking in my list, well, since it's the first game we've covered so far, I'm going to put it square at number 1. Good job, Persona 4. Thanks for watching, guys, and don't forget to slap the shit out of the subscribe button to get notified the next upload. The game we'll be covering next is a game from a series I respect but don't really enjoy, Dark Souls 3. You might be looking forward to it, but I'm not. Alright, see you later.